My name is Melanie Rose Rodgers. I am a Filipina community organizer based here in Denver. I'm also the executive director of Expunge, Colorado, a local nonprofit dedicated to enabling people to move forward from their criminal records. Since 2018, we have been hosting a free annual record sealing clinic in Denver, and we have helped over 600 people determine eligibility for record sealing, as well as sealed over 220 cases. So I'm really proud of that work. Thank you. Record sealing removes the barriers of having a criminal record, which keeps people from having jobs, housing, financial aid. Later in life, when parents want to volunteer at their schools, they're unable to because of a background check. So if it's eligible through Colorado law, we're able to then, through our clinic, seal them and provide pro bono legal services. And sometimes the cost of just a lawyer alone are out of reach for a lot of people. And in Colorado, 3 out of 10 people have a criminal record. In the United States, it's like 1.3 million people, 1 out of 3 people. And so I love the work because it not only helps that individual, but it also helps that person's family, community, and generations to come. So breaking up cycles of poverty, and really just giving people a deserving second chance at life. So that's, I'm the executive director and co-founder of that. I'm also the founder and co-leader at BIPOC Psychedelic. We are a local community organization that's been around since October 2021 was our first debut into the community, and we are a BIPOC-led and centered organization. If you've been to our BIPOC Psychedelic events, can you raise your hand? Yay, thank you so much. And shout out to Esther here, who's also a co-leader of the group. And so today I'm gonna talk about healing, insights, and lessons learned from really almost a decade of activism, advocacy, grassroots organizing in Denver. And I think it's really important too, as there's new administration, that we do find ways to, give back to the community, that we support each other in ways like mutual aid and offering safer and braver spaces for people to come together, especially people of color. And part of my story and my experience within the psychedelic community really fostered the need to create something that was specifically a place where people of color can lead, and that we are centered and we can, lead and come together and have joy and just like foster belonging and inclusivity. Because what I really found within my activism throughout the years is that I didn't always feel welcomed. And I saw, and you'll hear it today, because today's talk is really, my storytelling and kind of sharing what I've learned and what maybe I would have done differently, or what I know now that's helped me, propel me forward to be able to, organize and continue this work in activism, which can be a burnout. So a little bit about me. I'm Filipina. My parents immigrated in my mom, like in the 70s, my dad in the 80s, and I'm the first person born in my family in the US. So I like to say that's first generation. And so for me, that was a lot of, feeling like I didn't necessarily belong. My parents also very much assimilated, and they didn't want me to experience certain prejudices or things, so they didn't actually teach me the language. And so even in Filipino settings and community, I couldn't speak the language, so it was just this hard place where I was like, I don't belong, or I do belong, but not quite. And so that was interesting to navigate. And I also think that because my parents spoke the native dialect in the house, but then not teaching my sister and I, that also really turned up my communication skills. I had to read the room. I had to figure it out. I had to ask and demand to hear what they were talking about in English. And I think because of that, later on being like a marketer and a communications person, that my skills really honed in where I can, read the room. Something about me and my family that I think is important, because then it also just speaks to the work that I do, is that I'm not sure how many people know about the Philippines, but we were colonized under Spain's rule for 333 years. And not only Spain, but the United States and Japan. So after World War II, Japan then occupied the Philippines, and that war began. And so that's years of colonization and years of, the Filipino people also, erasure and like being forced into Catholicism and religion and indoctrination, and so I think that's important too, because what I found out through my own healing and like kind of understanding my own ancestral roots, which sacred medicine, plant medicine has helped, is to like get back to my roots, is that I learned that my great-great-grandfather, Lolo is what we call our grandparents or grandfathers. So my Lolo Rufino studied with Jose Rizal, who is one of the Filipino war heroes, who also fought against Spanish colonialism. And so that was really interesting to find out. I didn't know that until much later along my like medicine healing journey, was to really like ask questions and like really dig in to, find out am I sometimes feel so compelled to like stand up and speak out and like organize and put myself out there in these situations where I'm like calling out oppression and systematic power. And so I was really like excited to hear that it's in my blood. and so that was really, really interesting to find out. And I think that's important to share because through my own activism, and I'll share a little bit more, that's come up where I've just felt compelled to run a ballot initiative in 2022 in opposition to, or in response to the Natural Medicine Health Act, which actually passed. So that is something that I think that is important to share about my background in community organizing. Also, I think that, so how I got started in this, people ask, why do you care so much about plant medicine? Why do you care so much about, organizing and other people? And that's also in Filipino culture, we have this thing called kapwa, which is the relationship to oneself and others, where community is actually everything. I have this faint memory of going to the Philippines when I was like 8 or 9 years old, and it was my sister's birthday, and we fed the entire town of where my dad was. And it was like droves of just like, and of course Filipinos always come together with food and things, but it was just this cultural shock, if you will, from sometimes of like American culture and sometimes individualism, and everyone's like self-care, but then there's like collective care and collectivism and looking out for your community. And I feel like that's where I really connect with. And so just wanted to mention that of, the need for me to sometimes go out there and why I organize and why I felt compelled to even start, a path and, an organization like BIPOC Psychedelic. So that is, and I learned all that, plant medicine has taught me to really dive in to that, of understanding my roots. And I encourage others to, as well as with ceremony, to call in your ancestors, remember who you are, and find ways that you can like re-indigenize and go back to that. So how I got started in activism and advocacy was really showing up. In 2015, I started really with cannabis patient advocacy, and this was going to the Capitol and really learning the ropes. This was before adult use recreational cannabis had passed, and it was really about medical cannabis at the time. And I am so grateful because I really believe that advocating for patients' rights got me to where it is today, to where I am today. And a shout out to all the old G's, some that are no longer with us, and teaching me the ropes in like activism. And I think it's something that like, we're not really taught, right? Like, how are bills passed? How can you be civically engaged? And I think that's on purpose, right? Like, if people actually understood and knew the power that they have, for these people that are supposed to represent us and our needs and wants, I feel like there's a reason maybe that like that's not really taught. So I hope that that there's some lessons that I can share so that you feel empowered to go and talk to your representatives, because they do, and they are supposed to represent us. We all just voted, and it's like, who are we actually voting for? And so, especially on the ballot, and if you voted, you can reach out to those people. They are supposed to hear you and listen and respect the needs of their constituents, which are us, and people power. So I started going to the Capitol in 2015, and the first cause I remember is a couple things. It was to put medical marijuana in schools for children that need them. And that was pushed by parents, mothers, for kids with cerebral palsy, that needed an alternative to pharmaceuticals. So I've always been that type of person about like natural healing, alternatives, and also seeing these stories. Once you witness the stories of advocates and patients, you really can't look away. And then another issue that was also on the table was PTSD for veterans using medical cannabis. And actually, that was denied almost like 3 times before it actually passed. Could you believe it? And so like, that really taught me that a group of people, and these are mothers, these are like veterans, with no like actual, huge dollars, can push a grassroots campaign forward. You can actually make those changes at the state level to actually provide access to medical marijuana at school. So that was one reason, or that was one issue where I got my chops, if you will, on how to organize. And then in 2018, there was an effort to not only add, and this is, you had to run a bill through the Colorado legislature, which is from January to May, the actual session. And you had to run a bill to add to different qualifying conditions to the actual qualifying conditions for access to medical marijuana. And so at the time, there was, autism, or parents with autistic children that say, hey, we would like to use medical marijuana for our kids with autism. And then there was also any condition for which an opiate is prescribed. And I really am drawn to that. I don't know if in my peer and in my age group, I've lost a lot of people I can't even count, friends and family, to overdose. And so this was another way, again, like my interest with natural alternatives to healing. And so what I saw was we had ran a bill through the entire Colorado legislature that year, and it got vetoed by the governor. And that's something that the governor can actually do. And that is like, I find to be one of the most unfair things, but that is within his power, is that you have gone through the necessary steps and got the necessary votes through the House, through the Senate, and then now at the end, the governor can just be like, nope, for this reason, no. And that was really devastating. I remember we were at the Capitol, we staged a sit-in with families and kiddos, and, but then the very next year we went back and we split the bill up into 2 this time, and we ran a bill for, and this is me, and then my role in this, right? Because I'm not a mother with an autistic child. I'm not, I can speak, I can testify, but I was really kind of rallying the troops, getting people to come to the Capitol, like, putting public ways to take public action, which is writing your representatives, telling them to vote yes and no on certain issues. And so I really learned through then that politics can be so finicky, right? You think you have everything, but sometimes then you don't have the votes. So you have to come back stronger. And what I've learned is that coalition building is also one of the key steps in actually getting legislation passed through, and I'm speaking specifically through Colorado for right now. And so then after that next year, we passed those 2 bills. And so we expanded medical cannabis access throughout the state. It was a very active year, especially during that legislative session through January and May. And then that takes me to, psychedelics. Another reason why I'm so invested into the future of where this goes is because I also have had the longest relationship with psychedelics than cannabis. I was part of a underground rave scene in Miami in my youth. And there was freedom, there was breaking away from my family being so strict, so Catholic. There was this way of spiritual conscious openness. And I didn't understand the medicinal benefits. That I learned later on through campaigning. But this was a way of me being free, feeling alive, feeling that sense of belonging. And so that's one of them. And I've had every emotion on the spectrum for my experiences within psychedelics. I've had the most blissful, the most happy, the very confusing, the very complex, the very scary. I've even had an experience where it was very harmful and I scared everybody around me and I almost got taken away by paramedics and I was very scared. But what that experience in 2015 taught me was that what psychedelics can do is also bring up buried trauma when you least expect it. And that was then where I kind of took that experience and I was like, okay, all right, psychedelics, we're taking a huge break. I'm done, I'm figuring it out, I'm wondering, I'm melting all at the same time of why did I do that? I have friends who called it my exorcism. It was just really wild. And I don't know if you've ever had those experiences, but they will shake your core and you will probably just give yourself a very much needed break. Yeah. And so with that, there was that break. And then later, I got really the phone call through my activism where Denver was gonna run a ballot initiative to be the first city to decriminalize psilocybin mushrooms. This was 2017, 2018. And so they needed a petitioner because how it works in local municipalities is that you have to get citizens to put forward a ballot initiative and then you have to bring it to city council. The question is, what are my perspectives on psychedelic science returning in 2025? Oh. And I've been thinking about this a lot. There's a lot of discussion happening in certain signal groups right now and I'm even wondering, what my involvement is this year. Last year, one thing that I did do, even with everything that happened, I just explained some of the racial trauma that I experienced within community here, is that when psychedelic science was here in 2023, I helped put on 5 events. I put on a BIPOC brunch, 2 events of those. I was also part of the BIPOC Chill and Liberation Zone that happened at the conference. So that was a space for people of color to go to where they can decompress, they can connect. And that was super special to have that. And then some other events. I did a BIPOC speed dating, or speed friending, and with Pammy, Psychedelic Sisterhood. So I've been wondering, to be involved, to not be involved. One thing that I, look at BIPOC Psychedelic is that we're a beacon. And it's a reminder that, hey, within the psychedelic community, we exist, we're here for you, we're here to build community, we're here to say, hey, you also belong in this ecosystem, wherever you are. And so it is challenging to see and wonder if I'm going to be involved. I was also an MC on the community stage, which was awesome. You know, just to be, I love to do that, host and have the mic. So, but I don't really know. I'm curious to find out what community thinks and what we can do. There's been talks of having almost like a other event. I still am like, again, being Filipino, just like love to bring people together. So I still would like to do that for, you know, the BIPOC community, especially during that week. So running some side event at least to come together. I really don't know, you know, yet. I haven't made up my mind, but I am very interested to hear what other people and what other leaders and people that I super admire, which I also put in that sheet on my Instagram, that we'll also send out via the Eventbrite. Like, what are the leaders that have participated, that actually spoke? What are they doing? What are the Indigenous people, what does a Native Coalition think? I mean, there's just so much that I don't know right now, but it is on my mind. And I lean towards what community thinks and where they want to go, but I also know if you know it's in Denver, I'm gonna want to host some kind of tangent event anyway. Probably bring back that brunch, bring back some events for the BIPOC community. The question and the thought here is, by branching off and doing our own things and segregating from the system, and I can even see this as being BIPOC psychedelic, right? Like, you know, we're BIPOC focused. And right now our events, aside from this one, and our community gatherings have been a monthly gathering where it is BIPOC folks, and it's for them, and it's, yeah. And so I've had this question kind of come up where then even with like, if we don't participate, if people of color don't participate in MAPS, then, you know, then are we able then to kind of make change and like still be a part of like the overall system? Is that it? Yeah. And so what is this, you know, what perhaps is my perspective on this? And I think that one, I believe like affinity groups and people of color groups definitely deserve to have those spaces. I believe that, you know, especially if you have ever seen A Table of Their Own or just that documentary, but like that also fosters safety, bravery, coming together in spaces where we don't sometimes always feel that in a bigger system. And so I believe that no matter what we do, it's important to also have those affinity groups. But then do we risk then not being able to, or have a sense of vulnerability is a question of then being off to the side and not part of the larger group. And that's where I think coalition, like building, and also then, you know, for other like groups and like allyship, again, watch out for performative allyship, but like that is really helpful. And even with BIPOC Psychedelic, I believe that like we have kind of our monthly gatherings and we have our own events, but I do believe like after we have like a nice core team, we can expand and invite everyone to then certain other events and certain things, maybe it's once a quarter. But I think it's important to like find the others first and like really feel safe and develop a sense of trust and like talk about common values of then how you might want to change, you know, go back together and change the system. And then like working with like other people that have power to then being able to like have them see what like our needs are and to like then like coalesce together. But I don't think there's I think there's vulnerability either way, but I just want to stress the importance of like still being able to have like our group where we feel like we belong, that trust is established. And then once we have that, then together working with the people that hold most of the power to be able then to come in together and to like state like, you know, our demands and the changes that we need. And then that's, yeah, I hope that kind of answers your question. The question is, with the fracturing that's happened, especially in Colorado's community, you know, am I hopeful that healing, that repair can happen, so that we can move on. And I actually believe that's a good point, because one, we have a lot more in common, again, than those that like oppose, psychedelics and natural medicine as a whole, right? And those groups exist. They were also the anti-cannabis, anti-medical groups, and the people that, so I do believe that yes, we have more commonality and we can find that shared ground. I do also believe that there should be accountability as well. And so the groups and the organizations that have created harm should very much apologize for the harm that they've created. And this is not just like my experience with a certain nonprofit, but also seeing how they've treated people of color like a revolving door. And that's just a tip for anyone, again, wanting to get involved, is like looking at the history of, especially if you're a person of color, of like how they've been treated. And now there's new leadership at this nonprofit, but if you're part of an organization that has created harm, and then you like put in new leaders, that doesn't absolve, you kind of inherit that. And so I think that what could have happened, or what can happen, is an apology. I know I would like an apology for that nonprofit then like attacking me and all sorts of things that happened after that. But just because like you bring in new leadership doesn't absolve like the foundation of being hurtful to people of color and marginalized groups as well. And I think that can happen, and it should be an investment, especially if whoever has money to invest in that type of a repair work, and that should also be prioritized. And I think once that can happen, once repair can happen, then yes, we should be able to move on, especially if these groups are people of color led also. And and I think that no matter what, we should be able to, especially over time, be able to come together and like work together and collaborate. But it starts with accountability to the harm that has been created. And I think that can happen. I think as far as some of the other, what I've seen is like, especially some of the campaign folks that were like paid by New Approach, I don't know what repair can happen with like them, because especially with the indigenous communities feeling so, like there was, someone who, and I've seen this over time, what happens is like tokenization of people of color. So then you have someone who's like perhaps indigenous being paid from like super PACs to be the face of certain campaigns. And so then people like lump in that they represent indigenous communities here, and that's not fair. So I don't know what that type of repair looks like with like those specific people. But I do believe in repair, and I believe that with time we can move forward, we can heal. But it first comes to like being accountable. What is one thing that I would like to see in the legislation right now? I would like to see, and this is kind of also listening to what has been said already, especially from indigenous groups and people, is protection of someone who has been facilitating, whether it be like ayahuasca, but like they are a legacy keeper of this medicine. They've been like blessed to, carry it through generations before them. So then how are they going to be able to like pay the licensure to, and like also ensure that they're not criminalized for their facilitation with the medicine that they've been doing already for many years? And I think that goes back to the legislation, like having a definition of indigenous, and that's something that doesn't exist right now. I mean, there's indigenous bona fide, but that's like something else. That's like maybe card-carrying Native American folks. I don't really know, but there's not a distinction of like protecting legacy keepers and stewards of this medicine that are, going to facilitate and really ensuring that they can operate, that they can, not be criminalized. I would like to see that, and I don't know if that exists. And there is, an indigenous working group within the Natural Medicine Health Act. That's something that like came through actually in Senate Bill 290. And and I just want to see, I really want to ensure that that we're listening to the legacy stewards and keepers of this medicine, that we're actually really listening, not just like checking the box that we're listening, you know, and like checking the box of equity, but then when you look around the room, it's the same people that have had all the power speaking on behalf of all these people, speaking for them, making the rules and regulations for them. So I would love to actually see like true equity and yeah, protections. Thank you so much for like witnessing my vulnerability and just sharing some of like really hard lessons learned. I hope you found this to be like valuable, and I hope it, you know, definitely inspires you to also like just be an advocate and to stand up for your beliefs and to find the others, find your community. So, thank you.